13 years ago, my husband Perce threw a copy of divorce papers at me and said, "She's moving in, so I sold the house." At that time, I couldn't quite grasp what Perce was saying. "So Layla, since the divorce is already final, hurry up and get out with Beckham." Those words have always stayed with me. I was shocked by what my son Beckham said when he came back from a job interview at a company. I asked the HR interviewer, "Does your company condone affairs?" Beckham's face then burst into a smile like I had never seen before. Apparently, the interviewer denied it. So I continued, "That's strange. Then why are you still here?" The interviewer at that time was none other than my former husband, Perce Rapp. "My name is Layla Ennis, 48 years old. I work at a call center for an insurance company. Beckham is my only family. We were abandoned by Perce 13 years ago. I met Perce when I was 20. I didn't go to college, but worked as a clerk at a subsidiary of a pharmaceutical company. I met Perce, then 27, who had come on assignment. He, from the head office, took an interest in me and started inviting me out for dinner. I had just become old enough to drink. There's no doubt I was thrilled to be asked out by an elite from the head office. After such occasions, we started dating. Eventually, I got pregnant. I was shaken. I thought he would be angry and break up with me. But then, Perce suggested we get married. When we went to greet my parents, my father, who was still alive at the time, heard him say, "I'll make Layla happy." At that time, marriages due to pregnancy were still not seen in the best light and were called shotgun marriages, so the ceremony was simple. Eventually, Beckham was born. Around that time, Perce returned to head office work, and I followed him, becoming a housewife. From then on, I dedicated myself to keeping the house. We bought a house with the help from Perce's parents when Beckham started elementary school. I thought I was living happy days, but I was closing my eyes to Perce coming home later and later as Beckham grew older. Having married young at 20, I didn't know what a typical marital life was like. I never questioned not knowing Perce's colleagues or superiors. Thinking back, there were plenty of signs leading to divorce. Then, on Beckham's 14th birthday, Perce said, "I've filed for divorce and sold the house, so get out," and left us. From a happy housewife at 35, I suddenly became a single mother with a 14-year-old Beckham. When I was unexpectedly returned to my parents' home, my brother Jeffrey and his wife were cold to me. By this time, my father had passed away, and the house belonged to my brother and his wife. Mommy, still about 60 at the time, was diminished, surrounded by a strong-willed sister-in-law and nieces who spoke without remorse. In the midst of this, Beckham and I were told, "You can stay for a bit, but find a job and leave soon." At that time, I couldn't think of a job I could do. A high school graduate, office clerk, no skills. But still, as a mother and son, we had to survive. I scoured job magazines looking for work that paid enough to support Beckham and me. I was still lucky, though. Beckham was 14. A difficult age, but he was sensible enough. Better than a mother with an infant. That's when I jumped into a call center at an insurance company. My office experience helped with phone responses. At first, I was a contract employee. Then, after a few years, I managed to become a full-time employee. But at first, it was an unknown world, and I was exhausted physically and mentally. However, this job taught me something. I knew nothing at the time of divorce. I hadn't gone to college, and my family wasn't highly educated. Even if that's not everything, being duped and financially strained during the divorce was partly due to my ignorance. It was a divorce due to infidelity, after all. If that was the case, I should have made Perce pay compensation and child support, but I never thought of that. Neither did Mommy nor Jeffrey. Perhaps if Jeffrey had any feelings for me, he might have come up with some idea from his acquaintances, but he didn't. I realized my unjust treatment after joining the insurance company and learning new things. But by then, it was too late. That's why I wanted Beckham to go to the best schools he desired. Wisdom and knowledge can save you. I don't want him to repeat my mistakes. And 13 years passed. Now my job, salary, and life are stable. Beckham got into a famous state university for STEM and even made it to a PhD program. It surprised me as a mother, and he said he would somehow manage the tuition. Amid his busy studies, how? I wondered. Then he found some non-repayable scholarships and secured them himself. I was merely signing as a guardian. He spent 4 years in college, 5 years in grad school. During that time, his competence was recognized, and companies scouted him. This is what it means when an extraordinary child is born to ordinary parents. Beckham's future must be filled with light. Yet, what unexpectedly comes back to me is that day. The day Perce abandoned me. That incident still stirs up unpleasant feelings in me. It was truly sudden. Perce came home and threw a crumpled paper at me and Beckham. When I unfolded it, it was a copy of the divorce papers. I had no recollection of signing it, but my name was written there in handwriting very similar to mine. "What do you mean by this?" I asked, and Perce said, "She's moving in, so I sold the house." I couldn't quite understand what Perce was saying. I never even imagined divorce. "So Layla, since the divorce is already final, hurry up and get out with Beckham." He said he wouldn't be merciful if we didn't leave within 3 days. I was 35 at the time. Having been just a housewife for 14 years, I couldn't think of what to do and headed to my parents' house. Perce's voice from that time still echoes in my ears. Maybe I should forget it. Now Beckham and I live reasonably settled lives. It's not that I can't forget. It's the frustration at myself for not being able to do anything and my resentment towards Perce. Now I understand that I could do something about it. Then, one holiday, I decided to sleep in late when my mobile phone rang. The number wasn't registered, so I decided to ignore it and went back to sleep. But the calls kept coming, breaking off and continuing. Eventually, I heard someone's voice from the voicemail. It was my former mother-in-law, Milla. She kept saying, "Please, let Beckham out." What could she mean? I thought, but decided not to answer directly. Later in the evening, Beckham came back in a suit unusually. When I told him about the call, "They finally come?" Beckham, with an expression I had never seen before, asked. He shook his body, slammed the table, and even laughed with tears. What could have happened? "Beckham, what did you do?" "Today was a job interview at a company, right? I told you, didn't I?" "Liar, tell Mom the truth." "It's not a lie, though." With that, Beckham began to tell what happened that day. The interview was indeed true. It was a pharmaceutical company that had scouted him, but the problem was the company. The pharmaceutical company Beckham mentioned was where I had worked as a clerk in its subsidiary. "It's no coincidence," Beckham said it casually. "By the way, the HR director who came for the interview was Perce Rapp." "What did you say?" "It's funny, this guy didn't realize I was Beckham at all." "Did you realize it?" "Of course. After all, I didn't need this interview. The company came to scout me, so there was no need for an interview." "Really?" "Yeah. I mean, they were the ones who approached me, so naturally there wouldn't be an interview." "But as the HR director, he must have seen your resume, right?" "He probably did. He must have. But I look quite different from when I was a middle schooler. Different hairstyle, different vibe, you know." "That's true." 13 years is a long time. Plus, I doubt he even remembered my face from back then." "That's true." I had been so caught up in my own thoughts that I forgot Beckham had also become estranged from Perce. "Besides, seeing my current address and education, even if the names matched, he wouldn't have guessed I was his son." That might be true. Beckham was only an above-average student in 8th grade 13 years ago. But after the divorce and changing schools, he began studying incredibly hard. His grades shot up to the top. He got into a good high school and maintained nearly top grades in STEM classes. Then he entered a renowned state university. He was in a seminar his junior year, and stayed on for 5 years in grad school, moving from a master's, and apparently achieved a lot in some complex areas that I don't quite understand. The scouts were companies that had noticed his achievements and wanted him. They wanted me, so I was in a position to choose. Beckham said this lightly. That's why I asked for an interview. I had researched and knew he was the HR director. I was surprised by how much he had done without me knowing. But he didn't change his expression when he saw me. The interview went as usual. But the difference was that Beckham got to ask more questions. So I asked the HR interviewer, does your company condone affairs? At that, Beckham's face overflowed with a smile like I had never seen before. What did the HR director say? He said, of course not. It's not ethically acceptable. Hilarious, right? So I continued, that's strange. Then why are you still here? At that, the HR director's face froze in an instant. Beckham seemed unable to stop laughing. Then, thankfully, the executive next to him asked what I meant by that. That's when I pulled this out. What he had was a wrinkled paper. It was the copy of the divorce papers Peirce had thrown at me that day. This is a copy of the document my mother was tricked into submitting by this man. What do you think about this? You kept that copy all this time? I thought I had thrown it away. I was sure I had tossed it in the trash. I didn't want to see it. I thought I had to throw everything away and leave. Yeah, I picked it up after you threw it away, so I kept it in this clear file, wrinkled like this, thinking it should never be lost. Why? Because this is evidence of what he did to you, and of forging an official document. It's not just that, there are various charges, like using a forged document, and the divorce papers were invalid at that time, so if he remarried, it would be bigamy. Bigamy? I'm not an expert, so I asked a friend from the law department in college about it to see if it would be a crime. A crime? Yeah, a clear crime. So I said it right there. Isn't this forgery of an official document? I gave a copy of the copy to the executive. A copy of the original, hence a copy of the copy. Because this copy has his fingerprints on it, no way I'm handing over the actual evidence. So, what do you think he did? What did he do? He suddenly stood up and yelled, You are accusing your father of being a criminal? Then he turned to the executive and kept saying, Everything this guy is saying is a complete lie, a misunderstanding. What? I felt like laughing. What was that man saying? But you've got to hand it to the executive. He seemed to really understand what I wanted to say. He directed the question at him. You know, there are power of dynamics within a company, right? That guy was probably aiming for the executive's position. It seemed like the executive was judging people. First, he kicked him out of the room, then turned to me and said, Did you request this interview with our company, not for the purpose of joining, but for this? I did apologize. I'm very grateful for your company's scout offer. I find it an attractive offer, but I wondered what it would mean if a company without ethics would continue to employ that man. I was amazed at how he could say all that so casually in an interview setting. The executive was truly capable. He said he was grateful for the information, whether or not I would join the company. He mentioned that when that guy remarried shortly after the divorce, he wondered why he chose a much younger woman. And he remembered you, Mom. Really? Yeah, Mom, you said your wedding was small, right? He was one of the few guests, as a colleague from the company at the time. That's so. I didn't know. But that guy was telling people around him that he was the one cheated on. But he was magnanimous enough not to ask for compensation during the divorce. The executive back then had doubts about why he didn't take me with him, and the executive had suspected who I was from my photo and name. We were abandoned because I lacked that kind of knowledge at the time. I'm really sorry. I would definitely fight back with a lawyer now, but back then, It's okay. I know Mom was a housewife all along. Suddenly being thrown out and having to work, raising me to that point was hard enough. Hey, Mom, I hardly remember anything about him. He was always busy with work, right? Or maybe it wasn't even work. That's right. Peirce really didn't stay at home much at the time. Maybe marrying me was a mistake for him. He rarely took me to his parents' house. It was only for Christmas or family gatherings, and if I went, I was just stuck helping in the kitchen. and normally it was just passing each other by with him busy working. Even when we bought the house, he decided everything, and before I knew it, we were living there. I realized early on in elementary school that our family was different, so I started acting out a bit. What? You did? Yeah, typical early adolescent instability. Right after entering middle school, I started noticing signs of another woman around him. What? I didn't tell you because I thought it would make you sad, but I regretted not saying anything when he threw the divorce papers at you and told you to leave. His voice sounded strained. I had never heard Beckham speak like this. Mom, I decided I needed to have a weapon no one could mess with. A weapon? Something that only I could do. I thought if I had that as my weapon, I could one day confront what he did. Beckham then said, I feel bad, but I used your situation as a lesson. A lesson, maybe so. He easily threw you away, and nobody could argue against it because you and your family lacked the knowledge to fight back. Honestly, I'm angry with Jeffrey and them too. You're angry with Jeffrey's family? No way, it's too much trouble, but even if I get into a good company and succeed, I'll never associate with them. Granny is different though. That's good. I felt a bit relieved. Because Granny told me everything she remembered about you at the time and kept apologizing, saying she was sorry. When did she say that? After I entered college, Jeffrey's cousins were trying to get my attention, saying they were students at the university. It was creepy. I had no idea his cousins were doing that. Mom, why don't we take Granny in? She's always been sorry towards you. It seems pitiful watching her at their house, restrained by her sister-in-law and them. Thank you. After finishing the conversation, I mentioned something I had been curious about. I've been getting calls from unknown numbers lately. Beckham asked to see it, so I handed him my mobile phone. Oh, it's his parents' place. The executive told me about it, Beckham said dismissively, and then pressed the call button, switching to speaker mode. Hello? Hello, is that you, Beckham? It was Milla's voice on the other end. I've heard from your father. You've gone all the way to a doctoral program at that university and are getting scouted by companies. To think such a fine young man came from that mother. Surely it's thanks to our family's blood. Beckham muttered quietly. What is she talking about? Would you like to be adopted by us? You'll be busy and need money, right? Better than staying with that poor woman. You're old enough for marriage, aren't you? We can arrange it for you. Isn't it a good offer? Are you listening, Beckham? I'm sorry for being such a woman, I said coldly into the mobile phone. By any chance, did you hear that I was the one who cheated? Well, that's not true. Beckham said he won't let it go, so I'll take over. Hello again. I was surprised to hear from the company's executive that Mom was falsely accused of cheating. So were you involved too, huh? No, that's not true. We were deceived by Perce. Calling Mom such a woman, you were complicit in a crime. Did you realize that? What? Your son is a bigamist who forged divorce papers to marry his new wife. I'm ashamed to share his blood. Of course, I want nothing to do with his parents, but soon, a lawyer appointed by me and Mom will settle the matter with your son. You don't want your inheritance? When I die, it'll all go to you. Beckham laughed mockingly. That's nothing. Worry about the compensation you'll owe instead. He then ended the call. Did I go too far? I shook my head vigorously, as laughter bubbled up inside me. That's right. If you've gone too far, I need to act too. That's the spirit. Beckham patted my back. Afterward, I got a lawyer's office referral through Beckham's friend and started pursuing compensation. I found out about Percy's affair 13 years ago, but I never looked into who he remarried or anything. I didn't want to think about it, nor did I have the luxury. I revisited all of that. I demanded compensation from Perce and 4 years of child support for Beckham. My mobile phone started ringing incessantly again. I'm a bigamist? What did you tell him? Now I'm finished? You're ruining me, my wife, and my kids? I gave you a good life for 14 years. Don't think this is over. etc. So I replied just once, "Why don't you sell your current house?" Then I changed my phone number. As a result, First, hit by our double attack, paid the compensation, was ousted from his HR director position, and was demoted to a deputy factory manager in a remote factory. I heard this from the executive we met again. Apparently, it's a nominal position close to a menial task where he can't defy the factory manager. His reputation plummeted after his crimes came to light. He was on an elite course in the company, but it's over for him now. The pharmaceutical company's factory is far from the big city. Peirce had to sell his apartment and use the proceeds to pay us. It was the only way he could afford what we demanded. His wife and children had to move with him. Apparently, she has no one else to turn to. She married him at 20 and has been a housewife with a high-status husband since then. It backfired. She wanted to stay in the city with her children, but it was impossible. Her parents' home is as rural as the relocation site. It seems she's not well liked by her in-laws. But I have my doubts about his family too. Considering how they treated me, it's clear that taking a 20-year-old bride twice is a sign they need to deal with their son. They should have advised their criminal son before writing off their worthless grandsons. That's probably why they tried to get close to Beckham. He's a talented grandson. But that's irrelevant to Beckham. By the way, I had an interesting story. After settling the compensation issue, the lawyer told me, "That man really a city person through and through." So what? His transfer location requires a car. I couldn't help but clap my hands. He's over 50 and struggling to get his driver's license at a driving school, and so is his wife. His wife too? Absolutely. You can't survive there without a car. For things like dropping off and picking up kids, grocery shopping. Also, in such rural areas, you won't get hired for part-time jobs without transportation. I couldn't help but laugh. Incidentally, I have a driver's license. Mommy insisted I get it, even lending me the money. That was the right decision. Hearing their story is just too funny. A proud former elite over 50. May he experience the terror of being scolded by driving instructors while he gets his license amid his daily menial tasks. The following spring, Beckham joined a research lab in another company, happily immersing himself in his own research. Our revenge was complete. Now it's time to enjoy life. "This is my youth," he said. That raises the question of when he'll find someone he likes and get married. "Rushing into marriage isn't always good." Mommy, now living with us, remarked thoughtfully. Exactly. I hope Beckham takes his time to find someone suitable for him, now that he's free from previous troubles. With Beckham's new job, we moved to a slightly bigger place midway between our workplaces. For a while, the three of us want to peacefully enjoy these long-awaited days.